So please help me welcome Hilfiger.
When I was a little girl, I wanted to be an actress on Broadway. I wanted to achieve great things, have a family, and help change the world for the better. I had big dreams for myself. Little did I know, I would maybe help change the world for the better, but just not in the ways that I expected. I grew up with privilege as the eldest of 4 children, with 2 parents who were successful clothing designers. Living in a posh town on the East Coast, I still felt that I wanted to prove to myself and to others that no matter what or where I came from, that I could still work hard. I did many things, from acting off Broadway to producing film and television, designing clothes, having art shows. And no one would ever have assumed that my body was being infiltrated by millions of evil spirochetes that only wanted one thing, or maybe a few, to take my life, my mind, and my body away from me. So I'll bring you back in time and give you a sense of how all of this started. In the summer of my 7th year, my family took a little vacation somewhere on the East Coast. And the only souvenir I ended up with on that vacation was a seemingly insignificant tick bite on the right side of my stomach. There was no bullseye rash, but my mother removed the tick and she brought it into a lab to get it tested, which her precaution in education was pretty rare for a mom living in the 90s. Unfortunately, I went undiagnosed and untreated. This was due to a failure in the testing protocols at the time, which sadly have not improved to this day, as well as doctors who did not know what to look for. Little did we know, the tick was carrying 2 debilitating diseases, Lyme disease, one of the Lyme diseases, like Neil mentioned, and babesiosis. Even though I got tested, the results were either inconclusive or on the borderline of being negative. But many prestigious doctors that my family took me to were baffled and without answers. I went home after the appointments, feeling like a fraud, an exaggerator, and still feeling very, very sick. I told myself to buck up and not complain, and tears from the physical pain and frustration would put me to sleep at night. As time went on, there were many unusual things that happened as I grew older. First, it started with really severe joint pain in my hips, my knees, my ankles, my neck, mostly my hips. That was the biggest one. Sometimes I had to walk with a cane. I sobbed in bathtubs that my parents would have to carry me into. There were times that I passed out from dizziness and weakness. My ability to read completely diminished. I had debilitating migraines. I was hospitalized for anxiety attacks. My memory started to fail me. I thought I was just dumb. I experienced extreme fatigue, muscle pain, the kind where your body feels like you've been beaten up by a baseball bat, so sensitive to the touch. Patchy, random vision loss. I got lost going to familiar places because of confusion. My brain totally shut down. Chronic nausea took over my body in such a way that I would go to the emergency room, and I became less and less hopeful that I would ever feel like a normal human being, whatever that means. I've been sick for so long that I really don't even know what that feels like. I fought so hard to act like a somewhat normal person, and I still tried to do many things. Please let me underscore 2 fallacies that are integral to understanding this experience A, that only rich white women can get this disease, where in fact Lyme disease is in 50 states and 80 countries. Lyme disease doesn't care what shoes you have, what kind of car you drive, where you grew up. It doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. In fact, the majority of people working outside have Lyme disease and don't even know it. And even if they did have the resources, they still wouldn't be able to help themselves. And this is especially true for children between the ages of 3 and 14 years old because they play outside the most. Which brings me to point B, that someone like me will get the best medical attention. In fact, the protocols necessary for diagnosing and treating this disease are as old and obsolete as the typewriter. Some doctors, to this day, are so uneducated when it comes to Lyme disease that even if you show up with a slew of symptoms and even a bullseye rash and a tick, they still might not treat you. The CDC tells us that Lyme disease is the fastest growing infectious disease currently. There are more new cases of Lyme disease than HIV and breast cancer combined. And that's with a 50% false negative testing system. Finally, when I was 18, almost 19 years old, just as the TV show I was in was airing, I experienced a severe nervous breakdown. I guess it had been coming for a long time, but I wasn't making sense when I spoke. I had no time and space awareness. I was repeating myself over and over in my thoughts. I was living in a total mental fog. I actually thought there were bugs in my body. I guess I was right. I couldn't sleep. I had no appetite because of the crippling nausea. I started writing on walls, having spiritual revelations, paranoid I was being followed, and the list goes on and on. And what many people don't know about Lyme disease is that it actually can cause manic or psychotic episodes. And when Lyme disease crosses the blood-brain barrier, it debilitates brain function. Lyme disease has been misdiagnosed in many people as Alzheimer's, chronic fatigue, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, and many other acute ailments that are hard to treat if not properly diagnosed. And over the course of my sickness, I was misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and anxiety disorder. I was so sick of not being understood or properly treated. I was so frustrated that after all this time, over 11 years, not only was I not getting any better, but I was getting worse. And all I wanted to do was go and escape to Jamaica. I mean, sounds like a better plan than just sitting around sick. Fortunately for me, my father staged an intervention, and while pretending that he was taking me to Jamaica, he took me to the psych ward where I needed to be. My father was forced to drug me and check me into the acute care unit at a psychiatric unit. When I woke up, realizing that I was not in Jamaica, I was very scared and confused. Little did I know, this was the major pivot that began my painful and necessary road to recovery. Thankfully, a psychiatrist there connected the dots and suspected that I might be dealing with long-term and untreated Lyme disease. Although all of my previous Lyme tests had come up as inconclusive or borderline in the past, the new results were through the roof. When I got tested again and found out that I was positive for both Lyme disease and babesiosis, I actually felt like I won the lottery. I really did. I felt so relieved. I felt validated. Once I was diagnosed, I thought that the cure was upon me. A course of antibiotics, I figured. I had no idea that there was no cure for long-term Lyme disease. The diagnosis was just one element of the process. Once I had an accurate diagnosis, which took over 12 years and many false negative results, I was put on an aggressive course of antibiotics. And I found myself on a merry-go-round of getting worse before I got better, which is herxing, as we all know. In about 6 to 9 months of staying on the aggressive treatments and many different doctors, I finally felt like I could take on the world, only to find myself crashing and burning months later. This became a cycle of ups and downs, relapsing, feeling better, thinking I was better, and relapsing all over again. I was on this roller coaster for over 7 years. I'm sure that they helped. I'm sure that they were like an army in my body. But they didn't only kill the bad guys. And I was on everything you can imagine, both orally and intravenously, with wonderful doctors who really knew what they were doing and tried their best to help me. Sometimes I blame myself for not taking care of myself as well as I should have. My father finally suggested that I try alternative medicine, homeopathy, Chinese medicine, acupuncture. He said that no stone should ever go unturned. I was overwrought by frustration, anger, isolation, self-pity, and weariness that made me think about throwing in the towel. I was living in bed. There was not one summer in my 20s that I did not spend bedridden. And that's not an exaggeration. Antidepressants only did so much. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to live, or do I want to die? I thought I'd give it one more shot. Along with self-acceptance and self-love, my body responded really well to aggressive homeopathic treatments, specific diets, lifestyle change, and meditation, and any alternative form of medicine I actually explored, no matter how crazy they were. Even though I was skeptical at times of some of these alternative treatments, I felt I had no choice but to explore them. And what did I have to lose? After I completed a very strict German detox, immune boosting, and homeopathic protocol, which entailed plenty of needles, I might add, I felt a lot better. I felt so well and strong that I thought I would do what I know how to do best: open a company, work, and prove my strength. I opened a clothing brand. It was really starting to take off. I was going into an office every day. I was having fashion shows biannually, running around between factories and fabric sources, picking colors and meeting wonderful people. I was in my glory and loving every minute of it, feeling like a real person. I even met the man who would eventually become my husband. He's sitting right there. Every day, I was so grateful that I was able to get out of bed, go to the grocery store without being confused and overwhelmed, able to write an email cognitively and under 10 minutes, able to have a proper conversation with people without cutting it short due to memory loss, brain fog, confusion, and fatigue. I thought I had reached the finish line. The worst was behind me. How wrong I was. Apparently, herbs and homeopathy alone weren't enough. I crashed so hard. I thought my brain would leave me forever. I went from a highly functioning businesswoman to being bedridden and unable to form a sentence yet again. I couldn't even remember my birthday. How can I explain to you how this feels when your brain is neurologically affected by this disease? It's nearly impossible to explain because there are so many different ways in which it happens. It's as if the wires in the brain are not communicating or connecting with each other, and you're aware that it's happening. I felt very trapped and frustrated that I had no control of how my brain was functioning. If someone asked me a question, which I knew the answer to, getting the answer out of my mouth was nearly impossible. Can you imagine how infuriating that is? I'm a fighter by nature, a real warrior, not a victim. Luckily, at this point, I had decided to put all of my knowledge and resources to pull me out of this place. It took a while. But what I realized was this. For me, it took more than just physical treatments. I realized that my environment, stress, and spiritual outlook, thank you very much. Excuse me. Needed to be changed and addressed. I did a lot of wacky things, but they all seemed to help. I went to extremes and cut out inflammatory foods, caffeine, alcohol, sugar, anything processed, wheat-filled, you get the gist. Then I started meditating every day and did affirmation writing exercises. I told myself that I was not a victim, and I kept my mind on a goal, a well person, possibly a mother, which I am today. I even cut out negative people around me, which really helped. I tried to go back to work, but who was I kidding? Fighting this disease was a full-time job on its own. My body couldn't keep up, so I surrendered. I realized I needed to take even more extreme measures to really get myself to a more balanced place. I was forced to close the doors on my clothing brand and move out of the manic energy of New York City. We moved to Los Angeles and started life over. Today, I live a more balanced life without having to go to such extremes, and I know my limits now. I know my brain might never be perfect, or maybe it will if you guys figure it out. For now, I am grateful that I can still enjoy life without having to run myself into the ground and feeling like giving up. I can still enjoy the pleasures of life. I hope you all can have the wisdom and the knowledge to never let a child like I was go through what I had to go through. A life of pain and a robbed childhood just because the blood tests were not advanced enough, or because the doctors were uneducated about the facts of this disease. If my daughter ever gets bit by a tick, God forbid, please let me feel secure and confident enough to be able to rely on our medical community to give her answers and help. Thank you for having me today.